In this lecture, I am going to talk about some of the applications of sensor networks. So, sensor networks, as I said in a previous lecture, can be used for serving different applications: agriculture, healthcare, space, and so on and so forth. Many different types of applications are possible. So, we will take up few of the applications where sensor networks can be used, and also keeping in mind some of the research works that we have done in our SWAN lab at IOT Kharagpur, and so that I can give you a little bit of more insight about how sensor networks can be used to address different problems of different application domains. So, the first thing that I am going to talk about is the problem of target tracking. So, let me explain to you what the problem of target tracking is. So, let us say target tracking. This is also known as object tracking. So, what happens is sensor networks are very much useful for surveillance applications. Surveillance applications means that we can use different types of sensors, we can use cameras, we can use a combination of all of these sensors, cameras, etc., to track a particular object, a particular target. Maybe there is some suspicious activity that is going on, maybe in a public place like a railway station, or maybe in a crowded place, some plaza or some marketplace or something like that. So, sensor networks can be used for surveillance applications. So, if there is already some sensor infrastructure that is deployed in a particular place, so these sensors can be used to first of all identify that there is something wrong that is going on. So, you need to have appropriate sensors, of course, and thereafter once it is detected that there is some suspicious activity that is going on, then to track the trajectory of the target. So, this tracking can be of two forms. One is that as and when the target moves, we keep on following the target using these different sensors. We keep on sensing where and how the target is moving. So, that can be done in real time. The other possibility is that to predict the trajectory of the target. So, predicting the trajectory of the target. So, it can be of two types. Now, what essentially in either of these cases, what essentially happens is we have different sensor nodes. These sensor nodes are placed all over in the terrain where monitoring has to be done. Now, let us say that there is an object, maybe a human, that has been detected by these sensors, these three sensors, this one and this one. So, the problem of target tracking is that when this target moves, the trajectory of that particular target has to be followed by these different sensors on the way. So, this is one. This is this particular problem. The second problem is to predict the trajectory. So, prediction means that let us say that this object has been identified here in this particular position by these sensors. It moves to the next location. The next location is, let us say, here, and then these sensors have detected this particular target, like this, it keeps on moving, etc., etc. It comes to this particular position, and then at this position we have to predict that what is going to be the next particular position or a sequence of positions of the target. So, we have to predict the next position or sequence of positions of this target. So, this is known as the problem of target tracking in sensor networks. So, going back, we have different types of formulations of the problem of target tracking. One is the push based formulation, which is about that nodes computing the position of the target and periodically notifying the sync node. So, if this is a sensor network deployment, then this particular target, this object has been identified by these sensors, have been sensed by these sensors, and then these sensors, when this object moves, it is going to compute the position of the target and then periodically at certain intervals of time notify to the sync node. In this case, let us say that this is the sync node, so it will be notified to this particular sync node. So, sync node is the one which basically gets all the data from the other nodes, the source nodes and the intermediate relay nodes. So, this is the sync node, let us say. Now, the other formulation is known as the pole based formulation, which is shown in the second figure over here. So, in this particular formulation, what we have is nodes registering the presence of the target to permit a low cost query. So, in other words, the nodes are going to send out, are going to poll all the other nodes to see if there is any object that is there in their locality, that means within their sensing range. So, this is the poll based. So, it is going to periodically, it is going to poll. So, every node is going to be polled periodically. And the third is where there is a tracker that is used. So, tracker basically follows the trail of the target and intercepts the target. So, this is known as the guided formulation. Okay. So, we have three distinct types of formulation of the problem of target tracking in sensor networks. The next point that I would also like to highlight is that target tracking is actually very important for sensor networks. Target tracking applications like surveillance, etc., are very attractive, and that is why there has been lot of research on target tracking or object tracking in sensor networks, lot of research. In our research group also, we have done a lot of work on target tracking, and so if you are interested, you can visit my website and can get access to these papers, research papers. But without getting into the research details, let me also highlight another particular aspect. So, let us say that we have, going back, we have a terrain like this. So, in this particular terrain, in the previous example, I had considered that there is a single target or single object, this human. Like this, there could be other objects as well, and this is quite natural, or this is quite typical in most of these applications, because normally you are not going to track a single object, normally it is going to be like there are multiple objects. So, tracking multiple objects is a even more difficult problem than single object tracking. Multi-object tracking is even more a difficult problem than multi-object tracking, and that is quite obvious. I do not need to really elaborate about why it is so. So, this multi-object tracking, one way is that individually you keep on tracking all the other objects as well, but that is not efficient. So, the problem is that how to efficiently how to track multiple objects in a terrain. Okay. So, now let us move to the second slide, where we have to understand how this target tracking basically functions. So, first let us say that we have different sensor nodes. These sensor nodes, they have an object in their position, in close to them, in their sensing range. Now, what has to happen is the different nodes have to do lot of cooperation for different purposes, maybe for aggregating the data, maybe for relaying the information that has been received about the tracking from other nodes who have actually detected the presence of the target or who are following the target, and so on and so forth. So, like this, lot of different types of cooperation has to happen, and then what happens is the position, the exact position of the target has to be computed, and this can be done using different ways. The position computation can be done in different ways. For example, using the concept of trilateration. Using the concept of trilateration, if we know the positions of these three different sensor nodes, we can easily compute the position of this particular object, which is within the sensing range of these three. Then after that, there has to be some prediction that has to happen. So, prediction is about that if the object is at a particular location at this at a certain instant of time, then at the latter instant of time after delta t time, let us say where the object is going to be. So, let us say that the object is going to be over here. So, this particular position has to be predicted, and thereafter issues such as energy management, etc., have to be taken care of, because it should not happen that large number of sensors basically are activated and they all start sensing. So, what is the minimum number of sensors that are required in order to efficiently track the target? First of all, identify the position of the target and then track it. So, activating those sensor nodes and those few sensor nodes, and basically putting the other nodes to the sleep mode, which is basically a low resource consuming, low energy consuming mode of the sensor nodes. So, this is another energy management problem that also has to be addressed alongside the problem of target tracking. So, I told you about the problem of target tracking. Like this, sensor networks can be used for various other applications as well. It has indeed been used in our research group. Apart from different other applications, we have particularly focused on the use of sensor networks in agriculture. So, in agriculture, we have basically focused on number one, surveillance of agricultural field. So, this is basically agricultural applications. We have also done some work on the use of sensor networks in the agricultural field for monitoring the soil parameters, So, for example, moisture content, water level content, and many other parameters. For example, the mineral content of the soil, phosphorus, nitrogen, and so on. So, these can also be sensed. So, soil moisture, water level, etc., they can be used, they can be sensed, and that information can be used for irrigation of the field. So, if the soil moisture of the particular field has gone down, we can irrigate the field and so on. Okay. So, like this, actually there are different types of applications. In surveillance, we have worked on monitoring if a particular agricultural field is protected from intrusions from let us say cattle, like cows, goats, etc., etc., because normally this is a very typical problem in a country like India, where we have different cattle and different animals getting into the field, damaging the crops and so on. So, this kind of surveillance of the field is also very much required. So, this kind of intrusions have to be detected, and this can be done with the help of this technology, the system that we have developed, which is known as the AID. So, AID is basically a prototype for agricultural intrusion detection using wireless sensor networks. We are using two types of sensors, the passive infrared sensor, the PIR sensor, and the ultrasonic sensor. So, when an intruder basically enters the field through the boundary of the field, the PIR sensor detects the object, that means the intruder, and the ultrasonic sensor basically senses the distance at which the object is located. So, this is why these two different sensors are used, the PIR sensor whether it has entered or not, and the ultrasonic sensor about how far the object is from that particular sensor. So, this is the schematic diagram. So, this is the agricultural field and an intruder getting in. These different sensors are deployed in the perimeter or the boundary, and these sensors will detect whether there is any intrusion that is going on or not, and if it is going on, then the farmer is going to be notified through cell phone or through other means at his home or wherever he is. This is the layered architecture of this particular system that we have developed. So, first two layers are sensing using PIR sensor and the ultrasonic sensor, and then processing by the microcontroller, and then routing, and finally the application level SMS and alert messages will be sent to the farmer or any other stakeholder of that particular field. So, this is one application. That means, this is the second application. The first is basically target tracking, second is agriculture, and in agriculture what we have just gone through is detecting intrusions in an agricultural field. We could, as I told you also, that we could use sensors, different types of sensors to measure, to monitor the soil conditions with respect to moisture content, water level content, and so on and so forth. And correspondingly, if let us say the soil parameters have gone down or is below a certain desired level, then the field is going to be irrigated. Now, let us look at something known as the multimedia sensor networks. Multimedia sensor networks is very interesting. In multimedia sensor networks, you use multimedia devices apart from the regular sensors. These regular sensors like temperature sensor, humidity sensor, soil moisture sensor, etc., etc., these in multimedia sensor network technology in the community is known as scalar sensors. These sensors are known as scalar sensors, and in addition we have the camera sensors. The camera sensors basically include like still cameras, small sized still cameras or video cameras, which can be integrated along with these scalar sensors to get a complete picture of what is going on in a particular terrain of interest. So, typically what would happen is we would be very much interested to get a complete picture, and for getting complete picture ideally we should have cameras everywhere which would take still images and so on, but that basically is not only expensive. Having too many cameras, deploying too many cameras in a field is not only expensive, but also that is not a very good solution from a network point of view, because if we have too many images of big size being taken, then these big images, big sized images are going to float all over in the network, and that is going to be not a very good solution for a resource constrained, more specifically a bandwidth constrained environment like a sensor network. So, the whole idea is, can we use large number of these inexpensive, cheap, low cost sensors, scalar sensors, and have a fewer camera sensors, and together can we have a better surveillance. So, how it is going to happen? I will show you. So, let us say that we have some terrain of interest. So here we can have these different scalar sensors all over, which can be something like temperature sensor, humidity sensor, soil moisture sensor, or whatever, depending on the application that we are targeting. And within this we would be using, so these are the green colored circles basically denote the scalar sensors, and then we would be using only a very few cameras. So these cameras are expensive, so we cannot use too many of them, and also from a network perspective, as I said before, we cannot use too many cameras. So so what is going to happen? First, these cameras, these scalar these scalar sensors, they are going to detect whether there is something going on or not, and thereafter, if indeed there is something, some suspicious activity or something going on and is detected by these scalar sensors through their collaborative sensing, then these sensors are going to activate the camera, and this camera is then going to surveil what exactly precisely is going on. Similarly, the other cameras could also be activated depending on the position of the particular object and how it is moving in the particular field. So this is how the camera and scalar sensors putting together can work collaboratively in a wireless multimedia sensor network. So there are different applications of multimedia sensor network. Surveillance is something that I was talking about right now, but we can also have wild habitat monitoring, like, you know, wild habitat monitoring means like you can have these multimedia sensor networks to track precisely and monitor how the different wild animals in their natural habitat are moving, how, what activities they are doing, whether they are healthy or not, and so on and so forth. Environmental monitoring likewise, and so on. So like this, actually there are different types of applications of multimedia sensor networks. Topology management is another very interesting problem. In topology management, what happens is that in the presence of these different sensors, and in our particular case we are talking about multimedia sensors, in the presence of these multimedia sensor networks and these different sensors, how the topology is going to be maintained over time, how these sensors are going to connect with one another over time, whether they are, you know, whether with respect to coverage, coverage means that with the different sensors, whether the entire region of interest is covered by at least one sensor or not. So with respect to coverage and connectivity, connectivity means that from every sensor whether there is connectivity to the sync node or not. So with respect to coverage and connectivity, whether at different instants of time the network is has a healthy topology. So this is what is taken care of in the problem of topology management, and this is one paper that is there for you as a source which you can go through to understand the problem of topology management in sensor networks. Another application and a technology that has evolved over time is nano networks. You must have already heard about lot of interest in nanostructures, nanomaterials, nano devices, and so on, and including nano sensors. But you may not have heard about nano networks. So nano networks, more specifically nano sensor networks, can be of two types. One is the electromagnetic nano sensor networks, the other one is the bio nano sensor networks. So the electromagnetic nano sensor networks, basically as the name suggests, the communication is through electromagnetic means, and the other one is bio nano sensor networks, where basically it is biomolecules that help in communication in the human body or any human or any other natural being. So nano devices are used for as nodes in a nano network or a nano sensor network, and every nano device has different components, like one of which is the nano sensor, nano actuator, nano power device, and so on and so forth. So, this is how the communication takes place, and between the source and source device and the sink, there is going to be, over the nano medium such as carbon nanotube, there is going to be flow of charges that is going to take place. And as you can see over here, this is in the scale of few nanometers only. So, as you can understand, one issue over here is to first design or fabricate nano sensors. Similarly, it is also required to design and fabricate other nano devices like nano actuators, nano power sources, and so on. And then the other problem is how we can put the nano sensors, nano actuators, nano power devices and the like together as a single device, the nano node. And this nano node also has a nano communication unit, and this communication unit of one nano node would help to connect with another nano node with a similar kind of receiving device. And this communication in nano electromagnetic networks takes place in the terahertz band. So, this is typically, this communication takes place in the terahertz band in nano networks. So, this is what I was telling you. This is a schematic of how a nano node looks like. So, we have this nano power unit, we have this nano sensors, actuators, nano memory, nano processor, nano antennas for communication, and so on, and these corresponding dimensions are also mentioned over here. So, this is like 1 micrometer, 2 micrometer, 6 micrometers, and so on. So, this is a very small kind of, extremely small scale, nanoscale node, which has to be fabricated not using conventional sensor node design mechanisms, but using a very sophisticated mechanism that is that takes help of nano fabrication units, nano fabrication facilities. So, earlier I was talking about this nano electromagnetic communication. I also mentioned that bio nano networks are possible, where the communication takes place through molecular exchange. So, information in this kind of bio nano networks is basically packed into something known as the vesicles, and the gap junction works as a mediator between the cells and the vesicles, and the information is exchanged between the communication entities using the molecules. So, in the electromagnetic communication, something like this happens. It is basically electromagnetic waves that basically are passed through some kind of nano material like a graphene or something like that, and the information is transferred from one device to another device. So, electromagnetic communication for nano networks centers around the 0.1 to 10 terahertz channel band. Then we have underwater acoustic sensor networks, where basically it is about submerging, conceptually submerging the sensor nodes that we are familiar with so far in the underwater domain, submerging them, let us say, in the ocean, and then having them sense and communicate to retrieve the information from under the surface of water. So, this conceptually is very simple and is similar to what happens in the terrestrial sensor network domain. However, in practice, achieving an underwater sensor network, fabricating a underwater sensor node and then connecting those nodes to communicate underwater, to sense and communicate underwater, is a hugely challenging task. And there are so many different challenges that have to be taken into account. The first thing is the mobility, mobility because of waves and currents underwater. The nodes, once you deploy them at a particular point, they are not going to maintain their position subsequently, they are going to move all around. So, how do you maintain the topology of the network in the first place? Second thing is that with respect to communication, when these different waves are hitting these different nodes, then they are also affecting the communication channel. The channel is also going to be affected. So, in such kind of noisy environment, how the communication is going to take place. Also, in addition, we have the medium, which is typically like saline in nature, where there is lot of temperature variation in the ocean column, where there is lot of pressure variation in the ocean column. So, all these also affect the communication channel and the performance of communication in such environments. So, different oceanic forces also have impact on these networks, and that is the reason trying to simulate an underwater sensor network and its environment is not very easy. So, one of the important concerns about simulation is that how the nodes in an underwater sensor network are going to move. So, for that there is a mobility model that has been proposed, and this is known as the there are different mobility models, one of which is the meandering current mobility model. So, this meandering current mobility model was proposed in a paper that was published in Infocom conference several years back, and thereafter we have proposed in our group a mobility model which is known as the OFMM, Oceanic Forces Mobility Model. And the characteristic of this particular OFMM mobility model is that we have taken into account the realistic forces that are going to hit a particular node in an oceanic environment, whereas the meandering current mobility model do not take all these different forces that we have considered. And this is how we have come up with this OFMM mobility model, and this can be used to simulate the behavior of underwater sensor networks. Localization is another problem. Localization problem is concerned about that how to localize the different nodes in the network, and as I said that underwater environments highly dynamic, highly chaotic, and localizing the position of the different nodes is highly challenging as well. And there are again lot of works that have been conducted on this particular problem. So, it is important to predict how the different nodes are going to move at different points of time accurately. So, accurately finding out that at a particular instant of time in the future where this node is going to be is a challenging problem of localization in underwater sensor networks. Protocols such as HASL, which use beacon sending, beacon reception and location estimation information to basically localize the nodes. So, these start with first getting some GPS coordinate from maybe a surface sink, and then start processes like dead reckoning and broadcasting beacons and so on, receiving the beacons, getting an estimate of location estimation through processes such as trilateration and so on, and this has been explained in detail in this particular paper that is referenced over here at the bottom of the slide. So, dead reckoning, I was mentioning to you about dead reckoning. Dead reckoning is, it is a technique of localization that is typically used in oceanic environments, where it is hard to find specific references. So, in dead reckoning what is done is based on the distance from a particular target or a particular node whose position is known, it is estimated how much far another node is located and at what angle. So, based on this distance and angular information, the position of the target at different instants of time in a marine environment is basically computed. This is a proposal, this is a paper, IEEE transactions on mobile computing, it appeared, and here basically we are talking about how to efficiently localize with the help of advanced techniques such as game theory and so on. So, here we have considered two types of nodes, the unlocalized nodes and the localized nodes. The problem is about, based on the location information from the localized nodes, how to get the location information of the unlocalized nodes. And for this, what we do is we vary the communication range, the transmission range of the nodes, and by varying it, the problem is to maximize the number of varying or increasing the transmission range. The problem is to maximize the number of nodes, other nodes which can be put within that corresponding range, the transmission range of a particular node. So, this is what is shown over here pictorially. As you can see, this particular node, it has an initial communication range like this, the transmission range, which can be increased further like these other circles. So, these are the three different ranges that are shown of the communication range or the transmission range of this particular node. Likewise, for the other nodes also it is shown like this. And the other problem is to maintain the topology, maintain the architecture in underwater sensor networks. For this, there is this architecture, the tic-tac-toe architecture, which is a self-organizing virtual architecture, has been proposed by us in the IET wireless sensor systems journal. And here basically what we do, I am not going into the details of it because it is not required. I just wanted to give you a flavor of this particular problem, because this is indeed very important and fundamental in the underwater sensor network community. So, it is required to calculate the duration of connectivity between the different underwater nodes, and what we have done is we have proposed this tic-tac-toe architecture, which is a self-organizing network architecture, by utilizing the dynamic formation of virtual topology. So, here there are three steps: neighbor finding, neighbor selection, and duty cycle management. So, duty cycle management means that based on the computation of how much the nodes are separated from each other, the other nodes and their corresponding duty cycles are set or reset accordingly. So, with this we come to an end of this particular lecture, and what I have tried to do in this lecture is to give you a feel of the different applications of sensor networks and the different research challenges in order to address those specific applications. And so, we have also gone through some of the high level ideas about how to address, what are the different solution approaches to address those problems. Thank you.